After giving birth, my husband beat me, leaving me unconscious. Frightened, he pretended I had fallen down the stairs. But he turned pale when the doctor. Before we begin, tell me in the comments which city you're listening from. I'd love to know how far my story has reached. Now get ready. It wasn't the baby's cry that filled the emergency room hallway that early morning. It was the scream of someone who had just been betrayed by the person she trusted the most. Camila Reyes was 25 years old, and her heart was full of dreams. Born in a neighborhood where scarcity was more common than tranquility, she had learned not to complain, to smile with little, and to dream in silence. Since she was a child, she had cared for her sick mother and worked in other people's homes to survive. Her greatest desire was to form a family that didn't hurt, a home different from the one she knew. That's why when Julian Torres appeared in her life like a ray of sunshine, she believed that destiny had finally remembered her. Julian had presence, tall, athletic, elegant, with light eyes and a voice that calmed any storm. Camila met him while cleaning an office where he gave motivational conferences. One day, her broom fell out of nervousness and he picked it up, smiled, and told her, "A woman with hands like those shouldn't be cleaning, she should be adored." That phrase was tattooed in her memory. From then on, the story began. 2 years later, Camila was on a gurney, her legs shaking and the gown sticking to her body from sweat. The birth was minutes away. Her breathing accelerated. Her pale skin reflected fear, but her eyes shone with emotion. Beside her, Julian held her hand. "Easy, my love, almost there," he whispered, stroking her forehead with cold fingers. Camila managed to smile. "Do you think he'll look more like you or me?" Julian didn't answer, he just pressed his lips together. The medical team entered with surgical precision. Dr. Montenegro, with years of experience in high-risk deliveries, took control. He was one of those doctors who didn't talk much, but knew how to see beyond the obvious. Beside him, Nurse Elena jotted everything down and assisted with precision. When her eyes met Julian's, something in her hardened, as if recognizing a familiar scent, one that isn't seen but is felt, the smell of hidden fear. "We're ready," Montenegro said. Camila screamed. The contraction was so strong she felt she would break in two. But minutes later, the baby's cry flooded the room. Tiago was born perfect, pink with a thick, dark head of hair. Camila cried tears of joy. Julian approached to see him, and something on his face changed. It wasn't tenderness, it wasn't pride, it was something else. "Everything okay, Dad?" the doctor asked. Julian nodded but didn't take his eyes off the child. His eyes narrowed as he observed the baby. The silence lasted a few seconds longer than normal. "He has quite dark skin, doesn't he?" Montenegro looked up. Elena paused her movement. Camila, still gasping from the effort, didn't notice. "It's completely normal, sir," the doctor intervened in a neutral tone. "Newborns often change their tone over the days." "Right," Julian replied without looking at anyone. Camila asked to hold the baby. When they placed him on her, she cried as if that weeping released all the years of pain she had endured in silence. "Hello, my love," she told the baby. "I'm your mommy. I promise this life won't hurt you." Julian remained in a corner, arms crossed. He watched. The next day, the room was filled with flowers, huge bouquets, balloons, expensive stuffed animals. The Torres family had sent everything as if it were a presidential announcement. Camila felt like she was in a dream. Her mother-in-law called via video chat. "Congratulations, dear. What joy for the baby. Though he looks different from when my sons were born, don't you think? But well, genetics sometimes plays its jokes." Camila didn't know what to reply. Julian barely spoke, only staring at the baby with a strange expression. When they were alone, Camila tried to hug him. "Love, we finally have a family." He moved away slightly. "A family? Are you sure it's my family?" That phrase landed like a stone. Camila froze. "What are you saying?" "Nothing. I just find it hard to understand how such a dark-skinned child comes from you and me. But well, it must be the hospital light." Camila wanted to scream at him, but she didn't. The wound from the delivery still hurt, and the wound of the soul was beginning to open. That night, while she slept deeply exhausted, Julian stayed awake. He walked around the room, picked up the baby, and observed him closely. At one point he murmured, "He doesn't look like me at all." Then he placed him in his crib and headed to the hallway. There he ran into Elena. "Everything okay, Mr. Torres?" "Yes, I just needed to stretch my legs. This hospital has long hallways, ideal for thinking." Elena looked at him attentively. Something didn't sit right with her. "Your wife's resting. Like an angel. It'll do her good." The delivery was very intense. Elena nodded but didn't move. She stayed there watching him until he returned to the room. During the day, Camila tried to talk to Julian, asking him why he was so distant. He was evasive, making excuses, work, pressure, being new to fatherhood. Camila swallowed the doubt as she had swallowed many other things. In the afternoon, Dr. Montenegro stopped by to check on her. He checked her vital signs and the baby's. Everything was fine, but before leaving, he paused for a second. "Camila, are you okay?" "Yes, doctor." "Why?" "I don't know. You seem subdued. Do you feel safe?" Camila looked at him confused. "Of course. I'm just tired. Everything is fine." Montenegro didn't insist, but upon leaving, he asked Elena to keep a close eye on that room. Hours passed and night fell again. Camila was sleeping. Julian was too, or so it seemed. Outside it was raining hard. And at some point in the early morning, a heartbreaking scream cut the silence. "Help! Help!" A nurse ran down the hallway. Several doctors emerged from their rooms. The emergency lights came on. Julian appeared running with the baby in his arms. "My wife fell down the stairs." Dr. Montenegro arrived immediately. Camila lay on the floor, unconscious, with blood on her forehead, her body in a strange position. Elena arrived seconds later. Something was off. She had cleaned that floor less than an hour ago. There was no moisture. There was nothing that would cause a fall. "How did this happen?" Montenegro asked. "I woke up and she wasn't in bed. I found her like this. She said she wanted to go to the restroom. I don't know. Please help her." The doctors quickly loaded her onto the gurney. The baby was crying. Julian tried to calm him with clumsy gestures. Montenegro looked at Camila's body. He looked at the direction of her room, he looked at the position of the fall, and he looked at Julian. Something didn't add up. The night that promised to be the happiest for Camila became the beginning of her worst nightmare. Although no one knew it yet, what had just happened would change her life forever. And the worst was about to begin. Minutes later, the constant beeping of the machines filled the intensive care unit. The air smelled of disinfectant and contained silence. Camila slowly opened her eyes. Everything was confusing, blurry, as if she had woken up from a dream whose ending she couldn't remember. She felt a sharp pain in her head, as if a hammer was pounding inside. She looked around and saw cables, tubes, and needles stuck in her arm. She tried to sit up, but her body didn't respond. A movement beside her caught her attention. Julian was sitting in a chair with a serious face and clasped hands. When he noticed she was waking up, he immediately stood. "Camila, easy, don't try to move," he said in a tone that sounded more rehearsed than real. What happened?" she asked with a weak voice, her throat dry. Julian stroked her forehead, though his hand was cold, distant. "You fell down the hospital stairs. You gave me the scare of my life." Camila tried to remember. Her mind was an incomplete puzzle. Fragments of blurry images, a hallway, the sound of rain, her accelerated breathing, and eyes. Julian's eyes fixed on her before everything went black. "What stairs?" she repeated in a confused murmur. "Yes, love. You left the room half asleep, who knows why. And when I went to look for you, you were already on the floor. If I hadn't screamed, I don't know what would have happened." Camila swallowed. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe him. He was her husband, the father of her son, but that look that crept into her memories made her tremble. Dr. Montenegro entered at that moment with a folder in his hand, greeted them both with a nod, and approached to check the monitors. "Camila, how do you feel?" "Dizzy, as if everything is unreal. It's normal after a blow like this, but the important thing is that you woke up. Your pressure is stable, and there are no internal hemorrhages. You'll need rest." Montenegro observed Julian's face, and then the bruises on Camila's body. The patterns of the injuries didn't convince him. There were marks on her arms and back that didn't correspond to a simple fall down the stairs. He silently made a note of it. When the examination was finished, the doctor approached Elena, the duty nurse, in the hallway. "Elena, look closely at this patient's injuries. They don't match." "What do you mean, doctor?" "That if she really fell, the severity of the blows should be concentrated on the front. But there are old marks, like previous beatings, and in places that can't be explained by an accidental fall." The nurse frowned. "And you think?" "I'm not asserting anything, but this smells fishy. Watch her closely and don't leave the room alone when he's inside." Inside the room, Julian took Camila's hand. "Love, the important thing is you're alive, but I need you to promise me you won't get out of bed alone again. You've got my soul hanging by a thread." She looked at him intently. There was tenderness in his voice, but his eyes, those eyes, brought back the same feeling from that night. A cold void, a shadow she hadn't noticed before. Later, Julian went out to talk on the phone. He locked himself in a deserted hallway, believing no one was listening. Mom, the problem is over, but we need to handle this fast. The fall could raise suspicion. The voice of Donna Teresa, his mother, echoed loud and clear on the other end of the line. This can't get out. Do you understand? If she talks, we'll sink her with false evidence. I know people. Camila has no one to back her up. I know, Mom. But Montenegro looked at me as if he doubted me. I'll take care of that, doctor. You just stick to the script. She's weak, confused. She'll do what you say. Meanwhile, Camila slept restlessly. In the middle of her dream, a memory broke through like a spark in the darkness. She saw the hallway, the rain hitting the windows, and Julian standing in front of her. He was saying something she couldn't hear. Then a shove, the sensation of falling, and the last flash, Julian's eyes serious, without a trace of love. She woke up startled. No! Elena rushed to her side. Easy, Camila, you're safe. The baby! I want to see my son. The nurse hesitated, looked toward the door, and then nodded. He's in neonatology. He's fine. I'll see if I can bring him for a few minutes. But when she left, Julian was already entering. What are you asking for? I want to see Tiago. I need to have him with me. He crossed his arms. No, Camila, you're not in condition. The doctors said you need rest. If you get agitated, you could get worse. I'm his mother. I have the right to see him. You also have the obligation to recover, and I will decide what is best for you. The tension in the room was so dense it could be cut with a knife. Camila clenched her fists, feeling helpless. Her eyes filled with tears. Hours later, as Nurse Elena was carefully bathing her, she discovered new bruises on her torso, some healing, others fresh. She observed them closely. Camila, how did you get these? She lowered her gaze. I don't know. Maybe I hit myself when I fell. These don't look recent. Camila didn't answer. A heavy silence invaded the room. That night, Dr. Montenegro decided to talk to a trusted colleague about what he had observed. He prepared a detailed report with photographs of the injuries and medical notes, but what he didn't know was that someone was already watching him. After finishing his shift, he left the hospital and headed to the parking lot. He started his car, took a deep breath, and thought about the risk he was taking by reporting a man as influential as Julian Torres. He decided he couldn't keep quiet. However, upon arriving home, his heart sank. His car, which he had parked in front of the door hours earlier, was destroyed. The windows were broken, the body crumpled as if a truck had run over it, and on the windshield, a paper written with clumsy letters. Stop sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. Montenegro gritted his teeth. He couldn't prove it yet. But he already knew who was behind it, and understood that what had started as suspicion was turning into a dangerous war. That same night, Camila slept in the hospital without imagining that her life was already marked by secrets, lies, and threats, and that every step she took in search of the truth would put at risk not only her life but also her son's. The silence of the hospital became unsettling, as if the walls knew that the story was just beginning. Outside, it was raining hard, and the drops hit the windows as if trying to warn of what was to come. The next morning, Camila woke up with the feeling that something wasn't right. She couldn't remember how she had gotten to the ICU, and every time she tried to reconstruct the night of her fall, her mind returned a fleeting image of Julian looking at her with an icy expression. She wanted to talk to someone, but every time she opened her mouth, Julian appeared before she could finish a sentence. Just rest, love. Don't think about anything, he would say in a soft voice like a father calming a child. In the hospital hallways, Dr. Montenegro paced back and forth. He held the photographs of Camila's injuries and the medical reports he had prepared in secret. He knew he had to proceed with caution because they had already tried to intimidate him with the destroyed car, but internally, he couldn't let this case be buried. Mid-morning, the murmur of the news reached the waiting room televisions. The headline rotated on all screens. Young mother with depressive history almost loses life after hospital incident. The images showed old photos of Camila taken from her social media, while a voiceover recounted that she had suffered emotional crises since adolescence, that doctors had treated her for anxiety, and that on that night, after the delivery, she had tried to get up in a confused state, causing an accident. Camila heard the report in her room. I couldn't believe it. That's a lie, she murmured, clutching the sheets. Julian entered right at that moment, smiling coldly. It's in your best interest to accept that version, Camila. No one will believe you if you say otherwise. I'll make sure the world knows it was an accident caused by your emotional fragility. She looked at him with rage and pain. Why are you doing this? because I couldn't stand anyone doubting my reputation, and because I'm not going to let you destroy the image of our family. Hours later, Camila's mother-in-law arrived at the hospital. Donna Teresa was an imposing woman, with glittering jewelry and a perfume that filled the room before she crossed the door. She greeted her son with affection, and looked at Camila with a false smile. "Dear, I hope you recover soon. You must think about your son, about how you're going to raise him. Though now that I think about it, a child needs stability, and you, with your fragile health, I don't know if you'll be ready." Camila felt the air escape her chest. "I'm his mother," she replied in a weak but firm voice. "No one is going to take him from me." Donna Teresa observed her with disdain. "We'll see, daughter. We'll see." The following days were a nightmare. Camila could only receive visits during hours Julian authorized. The nurses noticed that the orders came from the Torres family, not the hospital. Even Elena, who had tried to stay close, was removed from the case. It was in this context that Carla appeared. She introduced herself as Julian's cousin, a woman in her 30s, long hair, a wide smile. She arrived with gifts for the baby, diapers, clothes, rattles. Camila looked at her with suspicion. "You hadn't mentioned her?" she asked as soon as Carla left the room. Julian shrugged. "She's a distant cousin. I don't usually talk about my extended family, but she came to help. You should be grateful." Carla began to visit the baby frequently in neonatology. She held him in her arms with a tenderness that disconcerted Camila. Sometimes she seemed too interested, as if wanting to appropriate those moments. Every time Camila asked to see him, Carla was already there, holding him. Something wasn't right, but no one offered an explanation. Meanwhile, Dr. Montenegro tried to find a way to talk to Camila alone. One morning, he entered the room and asked Julian to step out for a moment to examine the patient. Julian smiled and said, "I'm sorry, doctor, but I won't leave her alone. She needs constant support." The doctor tried to insist. "It's part of the protocol. I need to ask her personal questions without third parties present." A couple of security guards approached instantly, as if they had been awaiting the order. "The doctor can examine her, but you stay," one of them told Julian. Montenegro understood the message. Someone powerful was pulling the strings. He had to resign himself and continue the examination under Julian's watchful eye. Days later, Lucia appeared, a social worker sent by the hospital. She had short hair, rectangular glasses, and a calm voice that conveyed trust. She introduced herself with a folder under her arm and sat next to Camila's bed. "I've come to verify your condition and your son's. It's standard procedure after an incident of this magnitude." Julian wanted to intervene, but Lucia stopped him with a firm gesture. "I need to speak with her alone. It's mandatory protocol." He looked at her with annoyance, but this time he couldn't refuse. He left the door ajar. Lucia leaned toward Camila and spoke in a low voice. "I've read the report. Something doesn't add up. I want you to tell me the truth. Was it an accident?" Camila's eyes filled with tears. She hesitated for a few seconds, afraid of being overheard. I don't know. I don't remember well. I just saw his eyes before I fell." Lucia wrote in her notebook and looked at her with understanding. "I want you to trust me. If you feel you are in danger, I need you to tell me." Camila nodded slowly. That night, unable to sleep, she searched for a pen and a notebook in the bedside drawer. She began to secretly write a diary. She wrote everything she remembered, what she felt, what she feared. She recounted Julian's subsequent comments, her mother-in-law's veiled threats, Carla's strange presence. It was her only way not to go crazy, to leave a trace in case something happened to her. "If anyone finds this, I want them to know I'm not crazy. I want them to know my son is the only thing keeping me alive," she wrote on one of the first pages. The next day, while she was having breakfast, something strange happened. The food tray arrived covered by a napkin. Upon removing it, she found a folded note among the cutlery. Her hand trembled as she opened it. The message was brief, written in hurried letters. It wasn't a fall. "He's going to make the child disappear. You have to escape." Camila's heart raced so fast she thought the machine beside her would betray her. She looked around, but no one seemed suspicious. She hid the note under the sheet, trembling with fear and confusion. Who had written it? Lucia? Elena? Someone else? Or was it a trap? While Julian conversed in the hallway with his mother, and Carla approached the baby with a smile full of unknown intentions, Camila understood that her life was entering an even more dangerous territory than she imagined. The hospital was no longer a refuge, it was a cage. And what was at stake was not only her freedom, but the life of her son. Camila was dozing fitfully uneasy, with the note hidden under the pillow and her heart beating so loud it sounded like a war drum. In her dreams, Tiago was crying. In her dreams, she saw hands tearing him from her chest and enveloping him in shadows. She woke up drenched in sweat, and the first thing she did was look toward the corner where they usually left the baby in the portable bassinet. But the bassinet was empty. A chill ran down her body. She thought perhaps the nurses had taken him for a checkup, but there was no notice, no record. She got up with effort, feeling the pain in her ribs, and pressed the call button. No one arrived. Minutes later, Julian appeared. He entered calmly, as if nothing had happened. "Where is Tiago?" Camila asked, her eyes wide with terror. Easy. They transferred him to another area for some tests. It seems he presented complications. Nothing serious. But it's better that he's monitored. Complications? What complications? I saw he was healthy, breathing fine. What did they do to him? Julian approached and took her hand hard, so hard it hurt. Calm down, Camila. Don't get agitated. If you keep this up, they're going to think you're not right in the head. Do you want that in your record? She tried to break free. I want to see him. Take me to him right now. Julian looked at her with a twisted smile. He's not at this hospital. They transferred him to a special unit. Don't worry, I'm taking care of it. The blood froze in her veins. That morning, Lucia appeared with her folder in hand. As soon as she crossed the room door, Camila lunged toward her. Help me. They took my son. They won't tell me where he is. They won't let me see him. Lucia looked at her worriedly. She turned toward Julian, who was standing in a corner. What does this mean? She asked. He smiled naturally. Everything is under control. The baby was transferred to a pediatric unit as a precaution. We already have all the paperwork. Lucia frowned and opened her folder. There was nothing, no transfer document. I don't have any official record of that, and I should have it. It must have slipped your mind, Julian replied with a venomous tone. You're human, you can make mistakes. Lucia felt that something was wrong. She leaned toward Camila and said in a low voice, I'm going to find out. Don't worry. That was the last time Camila saw her. The following afternoon, an internal memo circulated in the hospital. The social worker Lucia had been removed from her position for protocol violations. Camila screamed, pounded the bed with her fists, and pointed at Julian in front of everyone. He took my son. He's lying. He's stealing him. The staff tried to calm her. They held her arms. Some looked at her with compassion, others with distrust. Julian used the scene to reinforce his narrative. See how agitated she is? It's the trauma of the delivery. I already said it. At that moment, Dr. Montenegro entered. He approached with firm steps, without taking his eyes off Julian. Enough of the theatrics, he said loudly. There is no transfer record. You are not a worried husband. You are a dangerous manipulator. This will not go unpunished. The room fell silent. Julian clenched his jaw and walked toward him. Do you really think you can talk to me like that? Do you think someone like you can go against us? She has no one. And you, doctor, better think twice before ruining your career. Montenegro did not lower his gaze. What you are doing has a name, and sooner or later, everything comes to light. The tension was unbearable. Camila cried, trembling, not knowing who to trust. Julian left the room as if nothing had happened, leaving a poisonous silence behind him. That night, as the hospital sank into apparent calm, Elena secretly approached Camila. She handed her a coat and a pair of sneakers. We can't wait any longer. He has everything under control in here. If you truly want your son, we have to get you out now. Camila hesitated, but desperation was stronger than fear. She dressed as best she could and left, leaning on Elena. They went through dark hallways, dodged guards, and climbed service stairs. Every step was a risk, every creak a potential tell. Upon reaching the back exit, she breathed deeply, thinking she was finally safe. But as she rounded the parking lot corner, she saw him. Julian was there next to a black car with the doors open. In his arms, he carried Tiago wrapped in a blanket, and beside him was not his mother, as she might have imagined. It was another, younger woman, with an elegant face and an obvious complicity in her eyes. She stroked the baby's head as if he were hers. Camila's heart broke. That's my son, she screamed, running toward them. Julian saw her and smiled triumphantly. He got into the car with the woman and the baby in his arms. The door slammed shut. The engine roared. Camila tried to reach them, but her legs, still weak, didn't carry her far. The car sped toward the highway leading to the airport. The scream that left her throat was so heartbreaking that even the hospital lights seemed to tremble. In that instant, Camila understood that she was no longer fighting to survive. Now she was fighting against a man willing to erase her life, and her sons just to maintain control. And she alone had to find the strength to face him. The car disappeared on the road to the airport, and the image remained etched in her mind. Julian holding Tiago with that triumphant smile, and beside him, the mysterious woman stroking the baby as if he were hers. Camila's body trembled, her legs couldn't hold her, and the scream she had let out had left her throat raw. Elena tried to hold her, but she could barely stand. "He took him," Camila stammered. "He took him, and no one will believe me." The nurse hugged her, though she knew the hospital walls had ears. "Don't say anything now, please, they'll silence you. You have to be smarter than them." The days that followed were a mixture of interrogations, enforced silences, and closed doors. No one knew or pretended not to know Tiago's whereabouts. The hospital had no transfer records, and every time Camila tried to speak to someone, they reminded her of the press circulating about her supposed mental state. It was the word of an unstable mother against that of a powerful family. It was in the midst of that desperation that she received an unexpected message. One afternoon, while under observation, a different nurse handed her a sealed envelope, assuring her it came from someone who cared about her. Inside was a handwritten note: "You are not alone. We will see each other again. Trust." The signature was clear: Lucia. The social worker, mysteriously dismissed, had not disappeared. She had continued investigating on her own. A week later, in a small, secluded cafe, Camila managed to meet her. She wore a hat that covered part of her face and a scarf to hide from curious eyes. "I thought I wouldn't see you again," Camila whispered. "They want to silence me, but I can't let them," Lucia replied. "I've followed the trail. Julian didn't flee abroad as everyone believes. He has another family in another state, a wife and 2 small children. And now Tiago is with them." Camila's heart stopped for a second. "Another family?" "Yes. And everything indicates that that woman is raising him as if he were hers. He managed to register Tiago with another name using false documents. Legally, your son now appears as her son." Desperation mixed with rage. "That child is mine. I carried him in my womb. I suffered every contraction, every pain. How could he do this to me?" Lucia took her hand. "You are not alone, Camila. Dr. Montenegro is also willing to help you. He is risking a lot, but he believes in you." A few days later, the 3 of them met at the doctor's discreet house. On the table were folders with evidence, copies of documents, photographs that Lucia had obtained. In one of them, Camila saw Tiago in the other woman's arms, smiling in a park. He had the same smile she remembered, but his little eyes no longer searched for her. "They are erasing me from his life," she said through tears. "They are making him forget who I am." Montenegro pounded the table with his fist. "That man cannot remain unpunished. Not only for you, but for the child too. What he is doing is a kidnapping disguised as legality." Camila wiped her tears. "I'll do whatever it takes. Even if it costs me my life, I will get my son back." The first step was to approach the house where Julian lived with his second family. Lucia found a contact in the neighborhood who allowed them to observe from a distance without arousing suspicion. Camila, disguised in a cap and dark glasses, hid behind a hedge. When she saw Tiago playing in the garden, she gasped for air. The child laughed, ran after a ball, and at no point searched for his real mother. Suddenly, she heard the little boy's voice. "Mommy, will you sing me a lullaby?" Camila's soul stopped. She expected to hear the melody she always sang to him when he was in her womb. But the woman responded with a different, unfamiliar song. The child snuggled into her arms, calm, trusting. Camila felt something inside her break into 1,000 pieces. She leaned her forehead against the railing, tears running down her cheeks. "He doesn't remember me anymore," she whispered. Lucia held her shoulders. "He's still small, Camila. That bond doesn't break so easily. They're just confusing him." But the wound was already inflicted. Meanwhile, Julian seemed untouchable. He had woven a network of contacts in politics and the justice system. His mother continued to move money to silence judges and police officers. Every attempt at a complaint was blocked. Montenegro presented medical reports, but they were archived without review. Headlines circulated in the press reinforcing the official version. "Mother with depressive history loses custody due to instability." Camila fell into a deep depression. She locked herself in her room and wrote everything she felt, everything she remembered about Tiago in her diary. It was the only way to keep him alive in her memory. Lucia and Montenegro tried to support her, but reality hit her harder every day. One morning during a checkup, she received news that took her breath away. The doctor explained that she had lupus, an autoimmune disease. Stress and trauma had accelerated its progression. Her body was beginning to attack itself. Fatigue, joint pain, and fever were clear signs. "How much time do I have?" she asked in a broken voice. The doctor avoided looking at her directly. "I can't give you an exact number, but you need treatment and calm. If you don't reduce the tension, your body will deteriorate faster." Camila left the office with trembling legs, looked at the gray sky, and pressed the diary against her chest. "I'm not going to give up," she told herself. "Even if my time is short, I will seek justice." That night, while writing in the diary, she thought about her son, about the eyes that no longer recognized her, about the song that had been replaced by another voice. Her rage transformed into determination. "They took everything from me, but they won't take my strength. I will execute one last plan, even if it costs me my life." The clock ticked slowly, the disease stalked her body. Julian seemed more untouchable than ever, and she, a weakened woman, had to fight against a monster with power and money. But that very fragility was what made her more dangerous, because she no longer feared losing anything. Fate began to lean toward an inevitable outcome. Camila felt it in her bones, in the fever that rose every night, in the tremors of her hands that reminded her body was weakened. And yet, deep in her heart, a voice told her she still had enough strength to fight the biggest battle of her life. She had observed the routine of the house where Julian lived with his second wife for weeks. She knew the exact time the children left for school, the time the cleaning staff entered, and the time Julian himself locked himself in his office. It was Lucia who obtained the false documents that allowed her to apply as a nanny candidate. The contact was made through an agency carefully manipulated, so as not to arouse suspicion. The day she rang the doorbell of that house, Camila felt her heart would burst. She had her hair pulled back, subtle makeup that aged her a few years, and a contained voice that barely dared to come out. The door opened and she appeared, Julian's second wife. She had impeccable beauty, the air of a woman accustomed to comfort, but also a hidden sadness in her eyes. "Good afternoon, I'm here for the nanny vacancy," Camila said in the most serene tone she could muster. The woman looked her up and down, let her in, and subjected her to rapid questions. Camila responded with rehearsed phrases, with the confidence she had practiced in front of the mirror. When she mentioned that she had experience caring for newborns, Julian's wife showed a glimmer of interest. "The little one is very attached to me. He doesn't trust just anyone. If you manage to keep him with you for a few minutes without crying, the job is yours." Camila felt her legs tremble. They led her to the living room where Tiago was playing with colored blocks. Time seemed to stop. There was her son, bigger than she remembered, with longer hair, his laugh intact. But when she took him in her arms, he looked at her strangely. He didn't recognize her. The child frowned and looked for the other woman. Camila smiled tenderly, stroked his hair, and murmured a very quiet melody, the song she had sung to him during the pregnancy. Tiago stood still for a few seconds, as if something in his memory wanted to awaken, but then he looked back at his other mother and stretched his arms toward her. The second wife took him, kissed him on the forehead, and said, "It looks like you like children. The job is yours." That night, Camila was left alone in the house for a few hours while the others went out to dinner. She took the opportunity and began to cautiously explore. She went up to Julian's office, opened drawers, checked folders, until she found a metal box hidden in a false panel of the closet. Inside were hard drives, USB sticks, and folders with photographs. Upon reviewing one of the devices on the computer, she gasped for air. They were recordings. Years of secret videos of her, intimate moments, manipulated discussions, fragments edited to make her look unbalanced. Julian had built an entire archive of false evidence with the intention of destroying her if she ever tried to rebel. "My God," she whispered, her skin crawling. She saved a copy on the flash drive hidden in her pocket and put everything back as she had found it. She went downstairs just in time before they returned. The following days confirmed her suspicions. The second wife was not happy. She lived in a gilded cage with luxuries and comforts, but always afraid of displeasing Julian. One afternoon, while having tea in the garden, the woman confessed, "I know Julian is not easy. Sometimes I think I made a mistake marrying him, but it's too late now. He controls me down to the way I breathe." Camila looked at her intently. She wanted to tell her the truth, to scream that this man was not just controlling, but a monster who had stolen her son. But she contained herself. It wasn't the time yet. Fate had a surprise in store for her. The woman named Carla, the one who had pretended to be Julian's cousin at the hospital, reappeared on the scene. One night, Camila found her in the kitchen gathering hidden items. Seeing her, Carla paled. "You," she said in a trembling voice. Camila closed the door and confronted her. "Who are you really?" Carla took a deep breath. Tears streamed down uncontrollably. "I'm an ex of Julian's. I thought he loved me, but he destroyed my life. When I left him, he swore that if I spoke, he would ruin me. When he asked me to pretend to be his cousin to watch you, I agreed because I was scared. But I'm tired. He's not going to stop." That moment changed everything. 3 women, different, wounded by the same man, decided to join forces. Camila, the mother who had lost her son, the second wife, trapped in a relationship of fear, and Carla, the ex-girlfriend used as a puppet. The plan began with Dr. Montenegro. Camila gave him the flash drive with the recordings, and he contacted a renowned journalist known for uncovering corruption cases. The woman agreed to listen. For hours, Montenegro, Lucia, and the 3 women told her everything. They showed her evidence, documents, videos. The journalist was shocked. "If this airs, very powerful people will fall. Are you ready for what's coming?" Camila responded without hesitation. "I've lost everything. I have nothing left to gain." The broadcast occurred on a Sunday during prime time. The entire country heard the story. A mother who had been silenced, manipulated evidence. A doctor who had been threatened, a child stolen from his own mother. They showed fragments of Julian's recordings, the false documents, Carla's statements. The impact was immediate. In the Torres house, the television transmitted the complaint while Dona Teresa screamed on the phone, demanding her contacts block the transmission. But it was too late. The video was already viral on social media. Julian went insane, hitting the table, throwing objects against the wall. "I'm going to kill them all," he screamed, his face disfigured by rage. He tried to flee, grabbed the car keys, and sped out, but on the way, fate exacted its toll. An intense pain shot through his head, he lost control of the vehicle, and slumped over the steering wheel. When they found him, his gaze was lost, unable to move half his body. A stroke had left him paralyzed. The news reached Dona Teresa. The woman, seeing the fall of her son on television, the public humiliation, the collapse of their empire of lies, suffered a fatal heart attack. Her ambition had sustained her for years, but in that moment it abandoned her. Camila did not celebrate. She only felt a strange emptiness, a mix of relief and sadness. She had won the battle, but the most important thing remained: recovering her son. When the police finally intervened, they removed Tiago from the house and took him to a temporary protection center. Camila waited for him with her heart in her hands. She saw him enter hand in hand with an agent. She ran toward him crying, "It's me, my love. It's Mommy." The child looked at her with confused eyes. He took a step back, hiding behind the agent. He didn't recognize her. That rejection was like a dagger plunging into the depths of her soul. The silence took over the room. Those present held their breath, and in that instant, Camila understood that the hardest battle had not yet ended. The one to recover not only custody but the heart of her son. Little Tiago, confused and frightened, hid behind a child protection agent. His eyes were wide open, and he searched with his gaze for the woman who had cared for him as if she were his mother for months. Camila extended her arms toward him, tears running down her face. But her hands remained suspended in the air. The child retreated, unable to recognize the woman who had brought him into the world. The social worker from the protection center intervened softly. "Don't force him, ma'am. He's been through too much. He needs time to adjust." Camila felt her soul break into 1,000 pieces, but she nodded. Inside, she knew that patience was her only ally. As much as she wanted to run to him, hug him, and never let go, she couldn't rush the healing process. For weeks, Camila dedicated herself to accompanying Tiago in the emotional support home to which they were both assigned. The place was simple, with colored walls and small rooms, but it conveyed peace. Mothers and children who had gone through similar situations lived there together. Camila joined the activities. She participated in games, in communal meals, always close, but without being intrusive. At first, Tiago barely looked at her. He sought refuge in the caregivers, in the other children, in the objects that were familiar to him. Every rejection was a knife in Camila's heart, but she never showed desperation in front of him. Every night, in silence, she wrote in her diary the words she couldn't say aloud. "I am your mother, and even if you don't remember me, I love you with all my soul." Lucia visited her frequently, bringing her encouragement and reminding her that the struggle she had started transcended her personal story. "Your pain is not in vain," she would say. "Many women are raising their voices because of you. What you experienced is opening the eyes of others." Dr. Montenegro also came to see her. He had become a constant ally, almost like a father. He brought copies of the progress of his book, where he recounted every detail of the case, not only to denounce Julian, but to make visible the reality of hundreds of women who suffered in silence. "Writing this has saved me from helplessness," he confessed. "But you are the one saving lives with your example." Meanwhile, the media didn't stop talking about the case. The documentary made by the journalist was broadcast in different countries, sparking a global debate. Camila, though fearful, agreed to give her testimony on camera. In it, she spoke of her pain, the manipulation, the forced silences, but also of the power she had found in deciding not to stay quiet. "I don't want my son to remember me as a victim," she said. "I want him to remember me as a woman who stood up, even after being thrown to the ground 1,000 times." In parallel, Julian lay in a psychiatric hospital, abandoned by everyone. The second wife had left him, his mother had died, and the friends who once defended him vanished like smoke. He spent his days in silence, watching a small television from his bed. One afternoon, Camila's documentary was broadcast. His eyes, once full of arrogance, now reflected an icy emptiness. He saw the woman he had tried to destroy converted into a symbol of resistance. "No," he mumbled with his mouth twisted by paralysis. "No." No one heard him. No one answered him. He was a solitary man, trapped in the silence of his own mind, a prisoner of a broken body. In the support home, the months passed slowly. Camila and Tiago began to share small routines. She accompanied him while he drew, helped him put together puzzles, and although he looked at her with distrust at first, little by little, he began to accept her presence. Camila didn't try to call him son, nor did she impose herself as his mother. She was simply there, constant, loving, patient. One afternoon, while all the children were resting, Camila sat in a corner of the room with Tiago on her lap. The child was playing with a small wooden car. She began to softly hum the song she had sung to him throughout the pregnancy. That melody had been her refuge in moments of fear. Tiago lifted his head, stood still listening. His little eyes widened as if something familiar was awakening in his memory. "You're the mommy who sang to me when I was sleeping in your tummy?" he asked in a trembling voice. Camila's heart exploded. Tears flowed so fiercely that she could barely speak. She hugged him with infinite tenderness and whispered between sobs, "Yes, my love, it's me." Tiago wrapped his small arms around her and squeezed her tightly. Camila cried as never before, not out of pain, but out of relief. She had recovered what she loved most, not just legally, but in the deepest sense, the sacred bond between mother and son. Over time, Camila and Tiago were able to leave the support home and build a simple life, but one full of love. Montenegro published his book, which quickly became a reference. Lucia created a foundation for female victims of abuse, named Free Voices, in honor of all those who had remained silent out of fear. Camila actively collaborated, sharing her experience in conferences, social programs, and workshops. The following years witnessed a transformation. What began as a story of pain became a movement of hope. Camila had become a powerful voice for those who couldn't speak. The last time Julian appeared in the news was in a small report showing the psychiatric hospital where he lived out his days. Sitting in a wheelchair, with a vacant stare, he watched the world move on without him. On the television in front of him, an interview with Camila was being broadcast, where she spoke about the importance of believing victims. No one approached to turn off the television. No one paid him attention. He was condemned to hear over and over again the voice of the woman he tried to destroy, and who now inspired thousands. That night, Camila wrote in her diary for the last time. She closed it calmly, put it away in a box along with Tiago's mementos, and sealed it with a phrase that reflected everything she had learned. Not all monsters have claws, some wear suits. But even in the deepest darkness, a mother can find the light. And in the powerful voice of the narrator that accompanied the close of her story, her final words resonated. Sometimes surviving is not enough. Sometimes surviving is just the beginning of the fight. But when you decide to raise your voice, the whole world can change with you. What did you think of this story? There are many people who, like Camila, are fighting silent battles every day. Our hope is that her voice has also resonated within you. If this story touched your heart, share it. Make more people feel accompanied. Be part of the change. Tell us in the comments what you would have done in her place. Which city are you watching us from? Reading you makes us feel closer to you. And if you haven't done so yet, like, subscribe, and hit the little bell. Every gesture from you is a sign that these stories must continue to be told. Don't go yet. Our next moving story is already appearing on your screen. Click on any of them and continue exploring this universe of real, moving, and necessary stories. Thank you for being here. Thank you for feeling with us. We send you a huge hug wherever you are. See you in the next one.